We're live now.
Hopefully.
You see the red dot, Ben?
There's not a red dot. What
I
are you
know,
talking
I know.
about, man? We
You didn't know about the red dot? Come on, dude.
No, I've just been winging this thing the whole time.
Yeah, but welcome to Money Mondays, everybody. We do this every Monday, 3:30 Central. I am your favorite host, Feras, and that's Ben over there. Monday, 3:30 Central, we go through a bunch of different topics. If you have suggestions for future ones, please let us know.
Yep.
But this week, we are talking about
the real estate life cycle on a multifamily property, right?
close, right? You got to read it right, word for word, Ben. Walk
I
through.
know, but I just like to wing it, man. Like I
multifamily real
said.
estate life cycle. Right?
Yeah, no. So we're going to talk about the whole soup to nuts, everybody, as much as we can in a 30-minute slot, right?
Absolutely.
You know, and we're going to use one of our deals as kind of a case study in that, you know, and kind of how we found it to how we manage it to how we actually ultimately sold it, right? And I think it's an important thing because there's so many moving pieces in this business, and that's why, you know, getting an education and understanding how it works is probably one of the most important things you can do when you're starting off.
Absolutely.
Or partnering with people that understand how the process works, you know, because otherwise you could get in a lot of trouble. So, all right, we got a little bit of a disclaimer. You always like to do disclaimers.
Disclaimer is, you know, we're going to talk, and Ben talks a lot. And I talk, but Ben talks more.
cuff.
But we like to give candid advice, candid thoughts, but please consult your expert. Don't go make big, important life decisions just because two guys in a cool studio told you so, right?
No,
so
absolutely
definitely
not.
talk to your experts, but, you know, we'll be candid.
Yeah.
Generally, we like to be very transparent and candid, and we'll talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. But please talk to your expert before you make those decisions. So that's my disclaimer.
You did a great job, man.
I know,
You did a great
I
job.
do the best.
All right, so this was our first deal that we did as a team. You know, we had both kind of done some deals prior to Disrupt Equity's inception, but this was kind of the deal that kind of kicked things off for us. You know, you want to kind of take us through?
Yeah, so it's a deal. You know, it's called it's called Woods Syndicator, right? We used to be called Laurel Mills. We ended up targeting, and we'll talk about it a little bit, right? But long story short, it was an ugly duckling, right?
It was a real.
It was a
ugly
deal
duckling.
that you know, took Ben probably a good 6 hours of the day to warm up to. Right, and you know, but ultimately it was a deal that I knew that we could not screw up. Right, it was ultimately it boiled down to me and Ben needing to do our job, and the deal would work. We didn't have to bet on rent pushes. We didn't have to bet on the market. Anything. We just had to get debt in place and do the business plan. Those are really the two biggest things. So, luckily, you know.
So how did we find? Let's start from the beginning, though, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people that are tuning in probably you're trying to get your first deal, or maybe you have your first deal and you're trying to get your second deal, right? So how did we find Woods Syndicator?
Yeah, so Woods Syndicator, I mean, talking to brokers, right? Talking to brokers, getting a sense of where they have interest and where they don't. And this is where I really like to ask the brokers, like, what deals are they not getting interested in? Why?
Yeah.
Right? Because again, those are the ugly ducklings, and I like those deals because it's a lot less competitive, and if I can find the right one, usually there's a good reason why most people aren't interested. But if I can find the right one that matches maybe what we're capable of doing or what we want to do, that's where a deal to be had is. And so in this case, it was a broker we knew. We had gotten to know very well. It was it was one of the only deals we had bought from at the time. But really, you know, they didn't have a lot of interest. It was a deal that was distressed. I mean, it was really distressed. And, you know, I remember going out there, touring this one and another deal, and offering on both of them, and we won this one, right?
Yep.
And so it was a deal that basically, you know, I remember being out there with our property manager at the time, Art, and he basically, I remember it was a rainy day, and it seems to be the first 2 years of Atlanta, my experience at Atlanta, it's always a rainy day whenever I'm out there.
Out there.
It's always dreary out there, but luckily the past couple times it's been much better.
It's
The past couple times. But I just remember it was rainy, it was chilly, it was December, and I remember Art is kind of, you know Art, and he's kind of looking around, he's like, you can expect a lot of turnover on this property. And little did I know he was very right. But, you know, it was a deal that we knew had some challenges. And
I thought he was being conservative, but his turnover percentages were actually pretty correct.
Absolutely. And so, you know, that's kind of how we initially saw the deal, found the deal. And at the time, you know, the broker came back and there's a little bit of negotiation, but we ultimately got it under contract, right?
So, so beyond the numbers, though, I mean, because you were the one who did the initial property tour, right? What was your sense of the area?
Being on site, I knew that the guys operating it had no business being in the business.
Okay.
I mean, you could tell they didn't know what they're doing. They had 9 down units that ultimately we knew, it was like a $30,000 repair.
Yes.
They basically had 9 down units because
you had to
some
replace
sewage
the sump pump.
Exactly, had a sump pump that I think we had budgeted $150,000 for, and ended up being $30,000 to get a high quality, professional grade business version in there.
Yep.
Right. And so that was the kind of that. I mean, but really you could just tell those guys didn't know what they're doing. You could tell the area each exit from the highway coming from downtown was basically if I kind of go towards downtown is improving. So that tells me things are coming out our way.
Yep.
Right. There's some good comps.
So there's a path of progress.
Yeah, the deal across the
right?
street was 100% occupied. There's a lot of things that you can see.
We
that,
like
okay,
that, and then there was some new development.
well, that was
happening.
before we got under contract.
Yeah,
Right. I remember
yep.
we got out there, and then during. I think it was actually during DTE, right? Or maybe right after we bought it, we saw that there was some construction going on.
Yeah.
And so, we got lucky, right?
No,
that
we
was
did.
not part of the plan, but
We did.
the deal right across the street, brand new deal went up there, and I mean, we saw it a couple of.
So one other thing I wanted to point out too, I mean, obviously we buy all of our deals through brokers, right? We're not doing cold calling or mailing letters or any of that stuff, right? But one thing we also target is the wrong broker on the right deal too, right? You know, and I'm not going to say that that's what that instance was, but we've also had
in this case
deals.
it wasn't. But
we've also had deals like that where you might have a guy that maybe does mainly residential stuff, but he stumbled across a client that has multifamily, right? That is a guy that you want to go target and potentially get a good deal on, because he's not going to have the buyer's list, he's not going to price it accordingly. Right, but this deal was priced to sell because the guys that we had bought it from had bought it out of an REO out of the bank. They had picked it up at
pennies on the dollar.
I mean, like I think 15 or 20,000, a door, and we ultimately got it in 38 a door.
Yeah.
You know, so even back then, that's a heck of a deal. Now it needed some work, but it was one of those deals where even on the OM they couldn't really capture a great picture of it.
No. They had one or two angles, right? We went out there and got some good ones.
I think one of the pictures was, it had like a broken down vehicle or something. I'm like, man, this is the best shots you guys got. So anyway, so we can go over the executive summary. We're going to go blow through this real quick, folks. Some of you guys might have heard this story already.
Yeah, but it's location. We could tell it was management, and I mean the area is high demand, right? Those are the three big things in the deal, right?
Yeah.
Deal across the street was 100% occupied. We knew if we got units online, we can get them leased. We knew that the leases that we're getting were below market, and so you can tell it was just a management play, right?
Well, and then they were self-managing, right? And they were just they weren't doing it the proper way. They were just a couple of guys, and they hired on a gal that was going to be kind of their manager, and they were just doing everything kind of in-house, and it was very sloppily done and poorly executed. So I would say it's most of this play was a management play. And then you had the 9 down units, right? But and that just takes some capex. So we had $900K that we ultimately got through the bank that we're going to put into this, and this is a 99 unit deal.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a substantial rehab budget for what it was, right? So some of the just a little bit of a map, of where this was at, and this is obviously in Atlanta. I don't know if we really talked about this, but Decatur is kind of a trendy sub-market within the Atlanta MSA. And I'd say if you're looking at this map, folks, like Decatur is on the north side of this highway, kind of going up maybe a few miles, and it's really gentrifying all the way along that I-20 corridor. And a lot of crazy, awesome things were happening right then and there, and it still is. So one of the deals that I like to point out too, because we use this and we secret shop this deal that was done pretty well, was a guy bought the vacant property across the street or across the highway.
Yeah.
I think he spent more on it vacant than we had on our deal.
Yeah.
He bought his at 39. We bought ours at 38. His was
makes
completely.
you ask yourself twice: are you paying in the right price or not?
Yeah, you got to, because I was like, wow, okay, well, if that guy's going to do that. But anyway, so he ended up putting $40,000 a door into it, folks. All right, so now let's say he's into it for 79. How much did he flip that out? $125,000 a door. He ended up selling that for.
Yeah, I think 100 somewhere around there. Yeah.
So I mean, that was happening as we were purchasing this, right? And then there's a few things. The property across the street, it was occupied and it had a waiting list. So obviously there's a ton of new demand. There's some new development. Obviously there's some Walmarts and some other things that are happening. This is still a solid kind of, I would say, C+ area, maybe B- in certain parts, right? Because it is gentrifying. You're gonna have pockets. But these were some of the things that we were seeing when we were kind of doing our market research. Going through some of the returns, right? You obviously have to have a deal that there's a solid exit plan, even if there is very little cash flow maybe up front, right? Because it's a heavy rehab play, it's a repositioning. You're trying to, kind of revitalize a tired deal. There needs to be a strong exit, right? And in this case, right, we were projecting to do a refi in kind of year 3, 4-ish, and then maybe hold on to it for a few more years. Ultimately, we execute our business plan. Obviously, the broker, as brokers do, they keep in contact with you and say, hey, how are things coming along? Are you guys looking to sell? What's the plan? And we were obviously constantly providing him with our financials. And he ultimately found somebody to actually buy it, right? And so it was, I think in year 2, we decided, hey, this is
18 months.
Yeah.
I mean, start to finish 18 months, or really at the 16-month mark, right?
Yeah.
Found someone buy it. And ultimately, people always ask, why does someone buy a deal, right? Why, whenever we're selling it, why would the other guy buy it? And ultimately, we did just one phase of a possible upgrade, right?
Yep.
We brought down units online, we improved a small subset of them, but we showed the next buyer, look, if you make the units look like this, you can get this $150 rent premium.
Yep.
Now, we were out of capital, right? We had done our CapEx, we had not planned to upgrade all the units, right? But the next guy can come in with capital, make the next set of improvements to match what we did, because we already showed them the path, and then they can get the rent premiums, right? And then whenever you get the rent premiums, you're now collecting more money, therefore adding more value, and then possibly sell it to the next guy, or just hold on to cash flow. And so there's a real reason for people to sell, right? And kind of buy as well. So that was kind of the story there.
We always tell people we're opportunistic, right? And ultimately I think we got 75, 80% return. And if you guys are looking at the same slide, we were talking about 104% return in year 5.
Yeah.
So we got a 70 or 80% return in year 2. Yeah. So of course we took the money.
1.5.
1.5, right?
Ben likes to round up all the time, so I don't get it.
It's year 2, but yes, you're right. So anyway, that's we're big proponents of, if you can get a good return for your investors, your IRR is going to be through the roof, obviously, right? And so, but to take a step back, so we got it under contract. Then you brought me out for due diligence.
Yeah.
What did my face look like when we walked out
I got to show
outside?
the before and after, man. Ben was just Ben was pissed. I was like, geez, like this guy, At the time, I didn't know Ben well enough, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to partner with this guy. I mean, but by the end of it,
that bad.
No,
I was more shocked than mad.
Shock was what I was gonna say. He had the look of disappointment / shock, a little bit of both.
Well, the deals that I had done here in Texas were significantly cleaner deals, and this was something like in a whole nother galaxy.
But I told Ben, I'm like, relax, chillax, bro beans. It'll be all right. And
well, I think we witnessed like a drug deal go down. I don't know. There was a lot of shady stuff that was happening in this property, folks. So the DD was very eye-opening. But by the end of the day, we're at dinner. I'm kind of decompressing, just processing it all, and I started seeing the potential. You have to look beyond the aesthetic look and feel of the property and say, is this a profitable endeavor, right? And ultimately, the numbers spoke for themselves. We had a clear business plan, right? And I felt like we could execute on it. So, I started kind of getting on board pretty quickly. So we obviously got through the due diligence. Some people have heard this story. We went with a lender that I would probably not recommend. I'm not going to say any names. You can message us offline if you'd like. But because the deal was a little bit challenging, we went with this kind of bridge lender that ultimately got across the finish line in 30 days. But they made that deal even more challenging than it needed to be.
Totally agree.
I mean, from not disclosing things up front on the closing and what we needed to bring to the table at closing to dragging out our lender draws at every possible point. So, ultimately, me and Feras and Mark Kinney, who was our business partner on this deal too, we just had to stroke checks and unjam the rehab while we waited for them to reimburse us. Because at one point, they didn't reimburse us for 6 months. Right, you can't do a rehab play when you're waiting around for 6 months to pay everybody. So that was kind of a big challenge for this deal too. But I'll go ahead and pause. Do we got any comments or questions?
So let's take a look. So multifamily, Money Mondays. We do this every Monday, 3:30 Central. For those of you tuning in,
you need your Starbucks.
I already finished my Starbucks. You didn't give me enough. But do it every Monday, 3:30 Central. Right? If people have questions, comments, let us know. If you have ideas for the next topic, let us know.
Please, come on.
And kind of going through today's comments. Let's see. So Ronnie says, "What's up, guys?" So
hey,
Ronnie,
buddy.
Of course,
hey,
our one of our top, I'd say, our top fans. But
big supporter, and we're a big supporter of Ronnie. Ronnie's doing some great things out there.
We also have Ernest, which he's labeled the top fan. So sorry, Ronnie says that. But Ronnie did have a question. Everyone talks about the acquisition process. No one talks about the disposition process.
Yep.
Can you dig in more on selling
Absolutely,
the deal?
man.
Right?
Yeah. I'm trying to tell a story.
So we'll definitely dig into that.
Yep.
Jefferson Savion, is kind of asking a question about Ronnie's as well. Jefferson Gunn says, "Happy Monday. Hope everyone has a great start of the week." Yeah, our Mondays are nuts.
We're trying to.
We start off the Mondays rough, just to the rest of the week.
This is actually probably the funnest part of our day, I'd say.
Yeah. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Ronnie says no plaid today.
Nah, man, I'm very self-conscious about it at this point, man.
That's very true, man. Every Monday I'm just like, it's a Monday. What's Ron? Are you going to call me out on it or not? So maybe we'll do a Plaid Monday intentional. Me and Ben will plan it out.
No, absolutely going to have to do it.
All right, so let's keep going.
All right. So we got in. Obviously, we had some challenges on the lender side. I think operationally it was a challenging play too, right? There was a fair, like Art had said, we ended up having a lot of turnover. So I think after year one, we had pretty much gone through the whole entire rent roll. People had moved out completely, and we'd shuffled in good, better paying tenants. We also had to shuffle in a couple different managers. Finally landed on a guy that we really like. His name's Abel. And he knew that demographic. He knew how to talk to them. He knew how to handle them, and he ultimately did a great job. But I still remember having some scary moments. Right, he got jumped. And this wasn't by a tenant either. It was by a disgruntled ex-vendor of ours.
Jumped. He had a fist fight. Jumped is different.
He totally came out of the blue and came after our manager, man.
Yeah.
But anyway, Abel put up a good fight. The guy ultimately got arrested. And the guy was on drugs, so it was just a long story. But bottom line, he fought and bled for the property too, and we'll be forever grateful for him. But he got it leased up. So we had taken it. On paper, we took it over, and I think they said it was about 70 or 80% occupied. In reality, it was about 40. And I think of that, maybe
we brought it down to the 40s in occupancy, then brought it back up to 95 in like 4 months.
Yeah, so I
remember Brent freaking out at the time. I'm like, relax, man, it's gonna be okay. But you're operating at 40%. You're losing money each month.
You're losing a ton of money, right? And so you have to be very, very careful. So that's one thing that I always say is on these types of plays, and really in just any play in general, you need to have reserves, right? Assume that you're running this at a negative cash flow position, and to the point where you might struggle to even pay your note, right? Now, so people understand, on a bridge loan, right, they're gonna have what's called an interest reserve account, right? So they set aside sometimes 6 to 12 months worth of principal and interest. And say if you were getting tight on not being able to cover the note, you can tap into that, and the lender on this deal had that same thing. We ultimately only used it once or twice, but it came in handy. Right, and they force you to use it. They force you to escrow it anyway, so it's your money. You might as well use it when you need to. So we kind of got it all the way down to 40% occupancy, right? We got rid of all the drug dealers and all those folks. Got good paying tenants in there. Cleaned it up, updated the property, interiors, exteriors. We did a paint. We added playgrounds. We updated the pool. The pool hadn't been online for years.
Yeah, brought those on. But note to self. Pools suck if you're bringing them online. We made this thing look beautiful, but we couldn't open it. The laws had changed. They wouldn't grandfather us in, right?
Yeah.
So you had to have a restroom that was accessible, and we just didn't have the budget to build a restroom.
But the next guy was doing that. That was a play for him, right?
Yeah.
Hey, we did the heavy lift on the pool. Now all you got to do is you got to rearrange the office and the
beautiful pool did help us close some leases. So.
No, it absolutely did, because we kept it clean, right?
Tenants see that you're spending money on the property, right? People want to see that.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a thing where the tenants start to take care of the property for you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a snowball effect, right? Things start to improve. So.
Yeah. We had a ton of turnover. We had to evict a ton of folks, right? We had gotten security out there to kind of help us kind of clean it up. We pushed rents with Abel's help, right? Collections literally tripled in 4 months.
Yep.
But that's what happens when you have to have a clean house, right? And then you obviously get good paying tenants in there. But it's nice when you're kind of doing these deals, because you see a tremendous trend line. And so, and obviously NOI, because we were trying to keep expenses in line too, was just getting bigger and bigger each month, right? And as you're trying to increase your value, that's ultimately what everybody's planning on, right? Is where's that NOI at? Where's collections at? And both of those look very, very strong. So, ultimately the brokers knew that, right? And they're like, hey, this is a good story. Then there was still meat on the bone, right? We had done the down units. We'd probably done, I'd say 30 or 40 of the other interiors, but that gave the other guy at least 40 units that he could update as well. Mm-hmm. Right, and there were still a lot of things that we wanted to do on the property, but like we said, we had a finite amount of rehab budget, and we had to kind of go through it, right? So 18-month hold, right? Total return, 80%. Mm-hmm. So our investors were pretty happy about that.
I'm just waiting to see where Ben's going to go with that big emphasis he did on the 18-month hold.
Well, no, because you're saying, it was a year and a half, and I was saying it was in year two. So that's
I get it.
18-month hold, right? But so that's what can happen, folks. And actually, we don't mind these types of plays. This is probably not a deal that we would do again, but it's nice to kind of say, hey, I'm just gonna roll up my sleeves for 18.
If it was bigger, I'd do it again.
Yeah, 18, 24 months. I'm just gonna grind it out. I have enough rehab budget. And it's all just about managing cash flow.
It's a starter deal, right? To get into a new market.
It's definitely a starter deal. And then I think this is one thing that we didn't bring up that we need to bring up, right? Is that this was a play that got us into Atlanta. It was a market that both me and Feras wanted to get into. We weren't experienced in that market. We weren't known in that market. So therefore it makes it more challenging to buy into a nicer, cleaner deal. They're gonna expect you to pay up, right? And we don't want to do that. So this was a deal that kind of got us our footprint and allowed us to kind of understand the market even more and develop those relationships out there in Atlanta so we could then scale. And we've since bought 3 more deals out there. We love the Atlanta market and we'll continue to buy out there. So the stats, right? We raised about 1.1. Back then it seemed like a lot. Now in hindsight, that's probably our smallest raise. Purchase price was $3.9 million. Sale price was about $7 million. So all in all, profits were about $2 million on this deal.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the high level stats on the deal. And once again, our investors were happy, and that makes us happy.
Yep.
So, open Q&A. I know that, let's talk about the disposition process, because Ronnie brought up something that we don't really talk about in this business, right?
Well, before we do that, let's go through comments. So those of you tuning in, Money Mondays, we do this every Monday, 3:30 Central. If you have questions, comments, let us know. If you have ideas for next topics, let us know. But I'm going to go through a few. Ronnie says, Abel's a great guy. Yes, he is. Savion says, can you speak on the turnover costs associated with the unit mix? Man, on that deal, turnovers might as well have been upgrades, man. It was
because these people were rough.
It was rough.
It was rough, man. You gotta realize that this was a rough demographic. They were rough on the units, and even not outside of that control, right? Just the management and the mismanagement, right? They weren't keeping up with the units either, right? And so their turn or their upgrade prior to this tenant moving in was probably very sloppily done. So we had to go in and we had to fix a lot of things. Right? And that's why turnover costs can be a killer to deals, right? That's why we try to incentivize people to stay at our properties, right? Don't move out. Let's build a community, right? Well, that's why we like families at our properties too, because they don't tend to move as much, right? Because each time somebody moves out, even in the best of circumstances, you're probably talking $3,000 to $5,000, right? So if you can keep them at the property for 2 or 3 years, or maybe even more, right? You're not having to spend that $3,000 to $5,000 for that unit each year, right? Now you got to maintain it, but you're not having to upgrade it every single year. So that was kind of the case with this deal, which is we had to move them out, and we baked that into our rehab plan too. So it wasn't anything that we were out of pocket on. But talking about the disposition process, going back to what Ronnie was asking about earlier, folks. So there's a couple ways that you can skin this cat, right? You can do an on market, right, which is fully blasted emails, which I'm sure anybody that's in the business understands those. You got a nice, pretty, sexy OM. And they do a best and final and all that stuff, right? Or you can shop it to a couple of brokers that you know in the area and say, hey, we're going to sell this off market, right? And they'll still do the due diligence, and sometimes they'll even put together maybe a smaller type of OM, probably 3 to 5 pages versus 40. And then they go out to their buyers that they know are active in that submarket, and they start saying, hey, these guys are looking to sell. This is what they want. Here are the financials. Here's our little deck. What do you think, right?
Yep.
And so it's just not more broadly marketed, right?
Yeah, because we didn't know if we kind of knew we'd probably sell, but it wasn't certain, right? And
We're testing. At the end of the day, why do people do it that way, right? Well, 2 things. You're testing the market, right? I want to see how much I could get for this right now, right? And we were pleasantly surprised. So
Ben was pleasantly surprised. No,
I mean,
I thought Ben was like, no. I'm like, yeah. Ben was like, no, and I'm like, yeah.
And ultimately it comes back, man. If that guy, if he's willing to pay that, then I'm willing to sell it, right? And so that's one reason why people do that too. The other reason that people sell off market versus on market is it's a lot less disruptive, no pun intended, to the on-site staff, right? When you have an on-market deal, there's going to be multiple property tours a week. The staff is going to get disrupted. They're going to be asked a bunch of questions, and ultimately they makes them anxious throughout the process that, am I going to have a job with the next guy or gal? And so now, are there still tours on an off-market deal? Yes, to an extent, but it's going to be a lot fewer and far between. And you can usually play it off as some kind of a lender inspection or an insurance inspection or whatever, right? So therefore not to spook the staff. And so that's the reason why people do an off-market transaction versus an on-market transaction. Great. But we found our buyer, and I won't name names, but a lot of people probably know him. He's a good guy out of Florida. And he ultimately bought the deal. And you got to go through kind of the process with the lender on his side, right? They're going to ask for a bunch of financials, a bunch of backup. What did you do, as far as your rehab? And you want to be forthcoming, right? That was the one thing I didn't like about the people that we bought it from. They were not forthcoming on their financials, and they really weren't all that helpful, right? Where we want to make the deal work, right? We want you to get financing because I don't want you to use that as an excuse to back out of the deal. So we're always willing to say, hey, whatever you need, we're willing to provide it.
Yep.
And so we did that with him. We had one or two extensions, but we ultimately got it across the finish line.
Yep. So let's keep going then. So I know it's already 4 o'clock. So usually we wrap up at 4 o'clock, but we'll do a few more questions, see if anyone has more comments, questions.
Yep.
Ronnie's asking how much working capital did y'all raise for the deal and what's typical. That deal is $900,000, $10,000 a unit. Usually not that high, right? It just depends on the situation.
Well, that was the rehab.
That was the rehab side. Sorry, the working capital again. It really depends on if you're doing a deep rehab or not. If you're doing a deep rehab, double what you need. I mean, really save more money.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a hard question to ask. It's
I think we had about 150 to 200K on that deal,
Just,
right?
yeah.
So I mean, it's rule of thumb, folks, is 5 to 10%, right?
Yeah.
If you have a heavy rehab play like that, you should probably have more than that.
Agreed. So let's keep going then. What's y'all's thoughts on Decatur now? We like it.
I love Decatur.
Decatur's up and coming.
It's a sexy market. It's gentrifying. There's a lot happening there, but you're not buying a 38K per door deal in anywhere around Decatur anymore.
If you are, come talk to us.
Yeah,
Let's keep
definitely.
going.
We were interested.
So Chris Collins says, hey guys, how do you establish your management out of state? I know you have in-house disrupt management, but do you hire local for on-site?
Yep.
Do you keep previous management personnel? Do you send people from Texas? A little bit of everything, right? So, if you're going to manage out of state, you're obviously going to have a local property manager that lives at the property, a local staff.
Yep.
Now, then the question next becomes, is it regional, right? If you have enough scale, you really want that regional local, right? They can go drive to the property every freaking day if they need to,
Yep.
right? And then you have back office and support that still needs to get out there occasionally, right? Now you can have the regional be, central and they're having to fly out there very often, but honestly, if you have enough scale and you can, it's better to have that person local.
No, absolutely.
Things just come up,
Absolutely.
right? And so the more you can do that, the better, but now it's all about numbers, right?
And on this deal, we did have a local property management company. This was a few years back, and they did a good job. But ultimately, I always equate, if you've got a good manager, and maybe even a good regional, which we had on this deal especially. We had Spring and we had Abel. They were a dynamic duo, and they ultimately did a very, very good job, right? But if you don't, you're going to have challenges. So
we got one last question from Trina. On the exit strategy, where's your profit sweet spot that would make you look at an earlier exit than planned? That's a good question. It depends on a lot of things. I mean, ultimately we need to look at net profit, including if we, assuming the loan or have to pay off the note. But net, I'd say if you're above 30 a year, that's a good deal. Right? It's still a good time.
Average annualized return.
Average, yeah. So if I can sell into year 3 and get 90%.
Heck yeah, I'm going to sell.
Yeah. Maybe now above 25 is probably because most deals you go into, you're doing 15 to 20% average annual, right? So if you kind of beat that quite a bit, probably make an exit.
Yeah.
And so it's it depends on what's going on. Maybe that market is not working out so well. The deal, you're able to make an exit. Maybe you want to make that exit, right? It just depends on the situation.
And we ultimately looked at the price per pound too, right? We said, okay, hey, I don't think we're going to be able to get much above what we're going to sell it to this gentleman for. And ultimately it depends on how much CapEx do you have left, right? Do you have more money to continue to improve the property? And in this case, we didn't, right? We had run out of our CapEx dollars. So it was just a natural life cycle of a deal, right?
So let's keep going then. Last question, and then maybe we're called a wrap, but let's see. So David asks, how do you guys determine on what a good property accountant does for a property? So that's kind of maybe the question's not clear. So the property management company has an accountant that does the books of the property, right? They're really doing vanilla accounting, right? They are looking at all the expenses, they're looking at all of the invoices, kind of,
paying bills,
all of that kind of stuff. Now, an asset manager, right, or maybe even a forensics accountant, right, is someone that can dig into that and figure out where there's opportunities. Was there being mismanagement of funds, right? Something negligent, right? That's a different role than the property accountant. Is maybe my answer to that.
And it's going to be a higher experienced person too, right? You're really your typical property accountant's probably 50, 60 grand, right? But you might have like a controller or a CFO or somebody that's a little bit more experienced, right? And those are going to be the people that you would have really, really dig in and maybe audit something. But yeah, day to day, you're going to offload that to your property management account.
So now Ronnie actually asked one last question. It's
What do you
very
got, buddy?
important. His question is, what was the closest Starbucks to this deal? It was actually very disappointing. It was probably a big reason I wanted to sell the deal. It was not very close by, to be honest. The closest one was basically probably either Decatur or downtown. Both were too far. Right? And
We
so
went to the one in Decatur.
We went to the one in
you
Decatur,
know,
but even
you
that
know.
was still like a 15, 20-minute drive.
Yeah,
so
it was good,
that
'cause it was like
this
as-
deal
as-
did not pass the Starbucks test, and so
Yeah, I mean,
it
as
was first on
the
chopping
bird
block.
flies, right, it would probably be like 5 minutes, but it was just the where this was located at, you had to kind of come up around and then go up to Decatur. But yeah, no, that didn't pass our Starbucks test,
No, it did not.
unfortunately.
So
You
we had
know.
to axe that deal. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but hopefully all future deals do pass
Heck
that.
yeah.
So-
Well, hey, I know we're running out of time, so Shanna, if you want to go to the last slide here, I just want to kind of, we can't talk about the whole entire process in a 30-minute show, folks. We'd love to, but ultimately we documented all of this. We took a huge deep dive in investoracademy.net, right? So we want to give our viewers,
We get asked
on Monday
all
Mondays.
the time about this, so that's why we put together the course.
Yeah.
So if anyone does want a deep dive, you're more than welcome to go check it out. It's
Yep.
really just us brain dumping in a educational, organized, more.
It's a thorough deep
yeah.
dive, right? We're opening up our kimono, we're behind the scenes, everything that you would need to know ultimately about how to buy a deal, how to find a deal, how to underwrite a deal. The whole shebang is there.
Yeah,
right?
with slides and presentations, the whole thing. So
Yep,
that's
yep.
our answer to, hey, can you guys help with X? So
Yeah.
definitely check it out.
No, and we
But-
really appreciate you guys supporting us, so that's why we want to kind of give you that 30% off.
Absolutely.
Right? So go check that out.
So then, so let's call it a wrap then, right? So if
Already?
anyone has any
It
more
just feels like that we got
questions,
shot out of a
go
cannon.
ahead and we
All right,
started
but
a few
before we
minutes
go,
late. Oh,
before we go, right? What's coming up next week, Ben?
tips for finding off-market deals.
Man, Shanna, come on! You're making these all complicated on
I
us.
know, so.
No, that should be fun. And
Well, no, it's actually a really easier one. You don't find off-market deals.
Oh.
Stay tuned for next week. I'll tell you guys why.
All right.
We'll call it a wrap then. If anyone has more questions, going once, going twice. Mondays. See you guys next week, next Monday at 3:30.